being in the climate emergency. I'm Violet, this is Bryden. Bryden, do you want to introduce yourself? And then he's going to take the first half, which is just covering a really condensed version of what Extinction Rebellion see as the emergency situation, and then we're going to move into the philosophy of why we need to rebel against the system. Bryden.
Hey, g'day. So my name is Bryden. I'm a scientist. I'm here at RMIT. I'm doing my PhD out of Bandura, sort of loosely in the field of biotechnology. So I'm sure everyone here is already very aware of what's going on, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. But I guess we're just going to try and get us into the right headspace to sort of think about why rebellion is necessary. So a good place to start is that climate change, well, I guess the two things I want to get across is that climate change is happening right now, not in the future, and that the window of time we have to address this is really quite short. So a great place to start is that it's already too hot. So we are seeing increases in the frequency and intensity of heat waves, and heat waves aren't just inconvenient, they actually kill. So I'm sure everyone remembers the Murray-Darling fish dieback earlier this year, had 1 million fish die. Last November we had 22,000 flying foxes drop dead. In Russia in 2018, 200,000 antelope. In Europe in 2003, 70,000 people. With the increased heat, we're also seeing increases in bushfires in their frequency and in their intensity. So look at the Amazon burning right now. It's mostly people just setting it on fire, but the Arctic is also on fire, as well as Queensland and New South Wales at the moment, which look like they're already going for another record-breaking season. Increasing heat means we're seeing that the poles are melting, and as they melt, they emit CO2 and methane, which contribute to further warming, and also causing these sea levels to rise. And this is something which is already displacing people. It's not something happening in the future. There are people who can't live where they live now because the sea levels have already begun to rise. And it's not just the water rising that displaces people, it salts the land, which makes it unsuitable for growing food, which is a big problem, because we're seeing massive decreases in arable land already. And another problem is freshwater. So this is Chennai. This is in India. This happened in June. This is a city of 10 million people. That is their water source, and it's totally dry. I believe they may have had some respite since then, but they're still an extreme threat. Schools shut down, businesses shut down, hospitals only do emergency surgeries. More or less, just everyone just waits for water. That's what happens. And this is planned to happen to, or expected to happen to, another 21 major cities in India next year. This is also happening in Australia. There are 12 towns which are sort of approaching day zero very shortly. Melbourne Water Report estimates that we could also be facing water stress here in Melbourne as soon as 10 years. We're also seeing massive land degradation. This is a problem for, I guess, how we can feed ourselves. So one of the problems we don't talk about a lot is this thing called desertification. It's the turning of arable dry land, which is a place you can grow food and live, into literal desert. And it's uninhabitable. We have already done this too. 10% of all the arable land in the world turned from a place where you can live into a literal desert. This is the Sahara swallowing up a town. In China, they have the Gobi Desert, which expands at a rate of 1,000 square kilometers a year, which is an area the size of Luxembourg. It's a small country, but it happens every year. And the total area this has happened to is the size of China. And of course, this causes, all these problems together cause mass migration. So it's estimated we've already got 65 million climate refugees around the world. And this number is expected to grow very substantially in the coming years. The UN estimates by water shortages alone, we're going to see 700 million people displaced by 2030. So that's not, in the distant future. This is happening really soon. And I think we already know how hard it is to deal with just a couple of thousand refugees. And so thinking about how that's going to play out on the international stage. So one of the ideas I guess I want to get across is to, what's going to be happening in the future is this concept of a tipping point. So we can think about what we're doing at the moment as pushing a boulder up a hill. It takes a lot of energy to get the boulder to the top of the hill, and we tend to move moderately slowly. But once we get to the top of the hill, not only does progress speed up very substantially, but the process becomes self-perpetuating and extremely difficult, if not impossible, to stop. So in the context of climate change, this is because of processes such as self-reinforcing feedback loops, which sort of increase the warming all by themselves without our input. The classic example is the albedo effect, and so this is the ice caps are white, so they reflect heat into space. But as it warms, the ice melts, which means there's less ice to reflect heat into space, which means it gets warmer, which means more ice melts, which means it gets warmer. And this also happens for sort of bushfires are sort of doing the same thing. As it gets hotter, we see more fires, they release more CO2, causes hotter, makes more fires, and so on. And so the thing that's really scary about tipping points is they have a point of no return. And this is often well before the point we actually start to see this exponential sort of change in effects. And that's sort of like at the point where it's locked in. And so these are some examples of tipping points globally. So like there's the the destabilization and melting of the ice sheets. And what you might notice for these ones in yellow, we're actually already in the range of possibly having tipped these elements. So there are people who think we've already gone past the point of no return for the Greenland ice sheet and the West Antarctic ice sheet, which locks in at least 10 meters of sea rise. Not this century, but it will happen. And then what's really scary is that they are all interconnected. And so if we tip one of these points, they have the potential to then tip other points here. And that's totally out of our control. And we really only need to be in this 1 to 3 degree range for that to happen. And so right now, we're heading for 4 degrees of warming under our current policies. And that is leading us towards this path on the right towards the hothouse Earth. And this is essentially these processes just run away by themselves and lead to sort of uncontrollable warming. And it essentially creates a planet that is more or less uninhabitable for us. Large parts of the world just become too hot to live in. We can't grow enough food. People starve. And I guess I'd like to point out here, we do have an opportunity at the moment to sort of avert this crisis. We are probably in the last sort of stage to be able to move away from this runaway warming scenario. It might already be too late, but it might not. So scientists have been sounding the alarm for years and years and years and years, and it's been ignored. But what we're seeing recently, we've had scientists create a whole new category of threat to describe what we're facing. It's been called an existential threat, which means that we are really looking at potential civilizational collapse and sort of the end of life as we know it. And that is where we are headed right now in this sort of business as usual, let's just peak emissions in 2030. And if we want to stay in this relatively safe zone where we have minimal risk of tipping these tipping points, we need emergency action immediately, we need to get to net zero carbon as soon as we possibly can, and we need to do massive drawdown of CO2 from the atmosphere. It's like there is a delayed effect in the warming, and if we can suck some of the CO2 back out of the atmosphere before it heats up, we might be able to prevent some of these effects from happening. And this is what that 4 degree warmer world might look like. We're literally looking at the deaths of billions of people. It's not going to be compatible with this kind of society we have at the moment. It's going to be devastating, not just for us, but like really all life on this planet. And I think that's something we should all really think about as well. And yeah, I'd just like to say, so at the moment, yeah, we're just in the end game. We are really running out of time to address this because if we leave it another 10 years, and we wait for the politicians to deal with this, it will be too late. We really have to sort this out right now. Yes. And this is what we're doing.
Thanks, Eden.
No worries.
Great job. All right, so that's pretty intense to hear. Thank you all for sitting through that. I know that's not a surprise to a lot of you, but I think that it's really good to just have that context of why we are in an emergency mode. I just want to talk a little bit about the bystander effect really quickly. So the bystander effect is what we're currently in at the moment. We're in this business as usual situation where people just keep going about their daily lives because they're not really sure how they can be effective. This is something that I thought coming out of university. I was relying on the individual approach. I was like, if I'm just a good person and I spread sustainability, then that's going to be enough. But unfortunately, that's not enough because we need such massive change so quickly. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to resolve this issue and we're going to head down that hothouse Earth waterfall. So the bystander effect, they did this study where they put a person in a room and if they were by themselves or filling out a form and smoke started coming through the vents, immediately they'd get up and go outside and be like, hey, there's smoke, what gives? But if that person was in the room with a bunch of actors who did not respond to the emergency, they'd start filling out the form, they'd see the smoke, they'd look around, see other people not responding, and then go back to filling out the form. And sometimes up to 20 minutes they'd stay there until they couldn't even see the form in front of them. We are herd animals. And so the biggest message that I can give you today is to sound the alarm for the people around you, start having these conversations. So scientists are sounding the alarm, as Bryden said. This is the IPCC Executive Director. It's like a deafening, piercing smoke alarm going off in the kitchen. We have to put out the fire. Deborah Roberts here, co-chair IPCC Impacts Group. It's like a line in the sand, and what it says to our species is that this is the moment and we must act now. So let's look what acting now looks like at the moment. I'll give you the same trigger warning that was given to us. Trump is coming. Bolsonaro, yeah, we'll know that one. This is some news of how our government is dealing with this current situation. And so I think that it's pretty clear from our current system that even though the scientists are sounding the alarm and we're very aware that we are heading to an uninhabitable Earth, our current political system does not have the capacity to deal with that emergency situation. And so we must rebel. We actually have to break the system. We have to break out of the system that we're in because it's not working, it's not effective, and it's sending us to extinction. So I guess I want to ask you, a lot of people, like, that's a very confronting idea, but what is a government for? A government, a lot of people say, is to protect us. It's meant to, manage society so that we can all live in a harmonious life together. But as Bryden has just pointed out, that is not our current trajectory. And so I'm studied philosophy, and so I want to harken back to my old buds here. And basically, the philosophy is that if our government is no longer protecting people, then we have a right to rebel. We have a right, and not just a right, but we have an obligation. We have a moral responsibility to rebel. We have a moral responsibility to change the current trajectory. This is something that is not new. It's not a new idea. And it's something that many people, very respectable people, have gotten on board with throughout history. And the only reason that I am able to stand up here in front of with you with any kind of credibility is because of the amazing people before me who have done that. The only reason that we have the 8-hour working day is because a guy took 100 lashes for it. It takes sacrifice. And the idea is that we cannot be radical enough. I know that this young lady, the name? Okay. She's a big hero of mine and a big hero of all of ours. And she definitely says that we must start sounding the alarm. We must start sounding the alarm for ourselves. We've got to start sounding the alarm for the people around us. And that the best way that we can do that is actually mass participation in civil disobedience. So it's about coming together and showing the strength and unity of our community, and saying that this system is broken and that we must have a better way of doing things. So Extinction Rebellion is actually based off, it's an integration of social science and environmental science. It's based a lot of Erica Chenoweth's work, and Erica Chenoweth and Maria actually had a little debate. They had a competition. They said, how do you make mass change? And Erica was like, it's got to be non-violent. And Maria was like, no, I'm pretty sure to make change, you've got to use violence. By the way, Erica won that debate there. And she said that historically, violence works 26% of the time. Often after 5 years, it does fail, though, because violence begets violence. So you're actually twice as likely to succeed with non-violence. And so Extinction Rebellion is based off non-violent direct action, because morally I'm against violence, but also it's the thing that works. We've got some great examples of non-violent direct action in Australia. What's this? Yeah. Does anyone want to tell a story? Someone? Come on. Yeah.
No, we're going to dam the Franklin with some beautiful wilderness, and people went just wave after wave, had non-violent direct action training, went up on little floaty things, stopped the development, stopped the people
She
went
knew,
in,
yeah.
and literally they went, and went to jail.
Yeah,
Hundreds of their thousands.
yeah. So everybody on this float was just...
Oh, someone else should be telling this story.
Everybody on this float would just sit out in the middle of the river. The police would come and arrest them all. And as they were processing these arrestees, a whole group more of people would come out and float in the middle of the river just waiting. And this is what it's about. It's about sacrifice. It's about saying that I'm willing to... There are some things more important than just my individual self, and I'm willing to sacrifice my story. I can tell you now, I thought that I'd be, having my own home and a career and everything right now, instead of sitting all in front of you, encouraging you all to rebel. But unfortunately, that's not the story that we have at the moment. The story that we have at the moment is that if we are going to survive, we need to actually break the system. So Erica Chenworth also said that there weren't any campaigns that had failed after they'd achieved 3.5% participation during a peak event. So we're aiming for 3.5% of people on the streets. However, you actually need less if you're willing to get arrested, and even less again if you're willing to go to jail, which is really, really incredible, really exciting that we actually have this formula that has worked, that can work to make this change in a very peaceful way. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you the 3 demands. So Extinction Rebellion have 3. Does anyone know the first one? Tell the truth, yeah. So the government must tell the truth by declaring a climate and ecological emergency, working with other institutions to communicate the urgency for change. So this must be front page news. I don't think that if people actually understood the brevity of the situation, they wouldn't get sick of hearing about it. It's our entire habitability at stake. So that should be communicated in a truthful and open way. What's the second demand? Act now. What does that mean?
Cut emissions and declare climate emergency.
Yep, so it is the government must act now to halt biodiversity loss and reduce greenhouse emissions to net zero by 2025. I also like to include drawdown in this one. As Bryden said, that is the only way to actually stay in that green, safe, relatively safe zone. And we heard about drawdown in the earlier session, so I think that that's really, really important. A lot of people say that this is really ambitious, but the idea is that we have actually done this massive change before during the war, which, that we were all at great risk, but this is a much bigger situation where this is going to cause many more deaths and much more disruption than any war we've seen. And they just allocated the resources. They just got it done. So this is the funding allocations between the 2 wars. I already did it. Demand 3, beyond politics. Government must create and be led by the decisions of a citizens' assembly on climate and ecological justice. So a citizens' assembly works like jury duty. You get a random and therefore representative selection of the population who come together and are advised by experts with funding disclosed, and they come up with fair and reasonable responses. We've actually held 20 citizens' assemblies in Australia already, so there's a nice baseline of expectation that it does work. I know Trent here from Darebin, he's held some. Hopefully he'll talk about the one that he told me about, because that was really beautiful outcome. Here's one that they held in Ireland. It was about abortion rights. It was really, really successful. Sorry, 1 minute. So I'll be really quick. So the point is that we have to tell the truth and act as if the truth is real, really break that bystander effect, because if not me, who? If not now, when? All right, I'm going to have to really bust through the last bit. So we've got key principles of nonviolent direct action. I'd encourage you to come to a longer talk. We normally give this talk in an hour and a half to 2 hours, so please come along to our Heading for Extinction, What to Do About It talk. But basically the idea is they're respectful, disruptive, sacrificial, and backfiring, which means that when if the police do crack down on the protesters, then we look peaceful and people want to empathise with us. We do non-violent direct action training. This is about basically giving people informed consent on what they're doing. Also, not everybody has to be arrestable, but that is definitely a part of the movement. So our actions, there are other parts though. So we've got creative, fun, they're family friendly. We've got a regenerative culture, that's really important. Connected and community. We run off 10 principles, key principles and values. I'm not going to read them out because we're running out of time, but I just wanted to let you know that they are there and to just have a quick breeze over them yourselves. This is all available online. Like I said, please come to the talk. We run off a organisational structure that is non-hierarchical, and there are many local groups all around Melbourne for you to get involved. And there are lots of ways to get involved. So arts, wellbeing, regen, action logistics, social media outreach, which is what I'm doing now. But if there's one thing that I can tell you to go away from today, other than joining Extinction Rebellion and getting involved in the movement, is to talk about the fact that we are in an emergency, open those conversations up to people around you, because we have to break that bystander effect, we have to break the silence, and we have to rebel for life, because otherwise we're headed for an uninhabitable earth. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly flag the Don't Mention the Emergency book here by Jane Morton, which a lot of the science is in there. She's been working tirelessly to get the emergency message out for a very, very long time. And in that book is just an incredible amount of resources to really have those conversations with people. Grab one, they're up the back there. So I just want to quickly flag what's next. We are doing a massive spring rebellion on the 7th of October. It is really, really important for us to have mass participation in this event. Come to Carlton Gardens, book yourself a week or 2 weeks off work if you can. Otherwise, come after work, come on the weekend. We're going to be basically disrupting the system, because it's only by disrupting the system that we get people to have a conversation about the emergency. Again, it's about breaking that bystander effect. By getting on the news, we get people to say, oh, you know, climate change. And even if they don't agree, if rebelling is too radical, it's like, well, I don't agree with what they're saying, but I definitely think we should tackle this issue. And that's something that we see over and over again. All right, in terms of regenerative culture.